And welcome to HBYOB Brewcast, where we talk about beer, we drink beer, and we even make beer. Just a couple of guys getting together tonight to talk about electric brewing systems. So join us. And welcome to HBYOB Brewcast. I'm Easy Kill. We're live tonight again on Facebook. We're now live again for the first time on the HBYOB.com website. You can now go there and click on it and watch us right now, right from the website. Or you can go to not Facebook, sorry. Go to YouTube. And we're also on Spreaker.com. Just type in HBYOB. I'm joined tonight, two of my co-hosts. First is Chris Allen. Chris, how are you doing this evening? And what kind of beer did you bring to the table?
Not too bad. Not doing too bad at all. As we were talking a little bit beforehand, I'm knee deep in fantasy football, free agency news. So time to unwind and have a good beer anyway. So perfect time for us to do that. And I'm actually drinking a Mosaic Nuggets can here by 450 North. So from what I'm hearing, it's all the rage as of right now. So I'm actually really looking forward to digging in and seeing how it tastes. And
where's that brewed at? I just want to know what kind of hat you're about to put on.
Oh no! I'm sorry to let you guys down tonight. No costumes, no gimmicks. I couldn't figure out one for tonight.
All right.
But 450 North, if I'm not mistaken, is somewhere in Indiana. If I'm not mistaken,
450. Yeah. That's just down the street from 420.
I'm not sure if that's the case, but
all right. My other co-host, the owner and the sponsor of the podcast, Joey Brumley from HBYOB.com. Joey, let us know where people can get a hold of you, and then what beer did you bring to the table tonight?
So you can get a hold of me at HBYOB.com, or you can email me at joey@HBYOB.com. Tonight I have Lagunitas Sucks, and I also have a homebrewed beer, just a session pale ale that I had made.
Oh, all right. So you have a homebrew with you.
Sorry, session IPA. Yeah, first for the homebrew cast, it's the first homebrew we've had so far.
First homebrew. All right. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So, and again, I'm Easy Kill. You can just find me on Twitter at A Fantasy Fan. Like I said, we're not judges. We're not experts. We're just three guys that drink beer, and one guy who owns a place where they make beer or sell ingredients to make beer. So we're changing up. We used to do this, the early shows where we just all brought our own beer. We went away from that for a few shows, mainly, I think, just to give people an idea of our different tastes that we all have. And now we're going back to where, we're just going to bring to the table, whatever we have in the refrigerator, because I'm guessing based on these two that we all have more. Maybe we'll say that. Before I say what beer I have, Chris, how many different beers are in your refrigerator, cold and drinkable right at the moment?
5.
Roughly. Only 5. Okay, that's a smaller number than I would have thought.
Yeah.
5 different beers. Are any of those a homebrew?
2 of them are, yes.
2 are homebrews. So you have 3 brand name beers, or just named beers, or I don't even know the word, manufactured beers. What the hell the name would be? And then 2 that you made yourself. Joey, how many different beers do you have currently drinkable?
So I have 4 homebrews that are drinkable right now, and I have 2 that are in carboys ready to be kegged. So 6 total homebrews, and in my fridge I've got a hodgepodge of stuff all over the place.
So just a little bit of everything. I'm kind of the same way. If anybody's listened to the show long enough, or our fantasy show knows, I've always got the 18-pack of Heineken at the bottom of the refrigerator. But I did count today. I have right now 12 different beers, none home brews in my refrigerator at the moment. And that didn't count. I have 2 different hard lemonades, and I have a couple of wine cooler type things, which I don't know how or ciders. I'm sorry. Mrs. Easy's a cider drinker. Tonight I went the opposite. I went to about the cheapest beer I could find that wasn't Natty Light. Monterey. This is from Aldi's, a very inexpensive import. There's no wall yet, so this is still cheap. As soon as the wall goes up, this shit's gonna really get expensive. I did go with the lime. I don't like that the neck is not as big as the Corona, so you probably could get maybe a little less than an ounce of tequila in here to do a Baja Fog with this. So might do that with the second one. So it is also the lowest rated beer I've had in a long time. It only rates a 2.4, but hey, sometimes though you just want something simple. So that's what I'm bringing to the table.
It doesn't seem like it ever wants to warm up out there, but on a hot summer day, even I'm known to shove a lime in a beer from time to time.
Yeah, I've had a couple of Bud Light limes in my day, so I can't hate.
I'm not sure. I'm guessing neither one of you have had a Monterey, but when it is the Corona, if you guys if you do a Corona without the lime, does it seem the same to you?
I can't remember, but I'll assume no.
I actually don't mind Corona too much. I kind of like that slightly skunky flavor that I get from it. Kind of one of those guilty pleasures.
But if you don't have the lime, it's missing something, right? I mean, there is something and I think you only get the lime taste from the rim before the lime actually goes in. I'm not sure how much of it ends up in the actual beer, but
from my understanding, a true Corona, they only put the lime there as a disinfectant for the rim of the bottle, and then we over the years misinterpreted it and shoved it in the beer. So I'm not sure Corona was ever intended to have a lime in it. I thought it was just a disinfectant.
I thought that was so the people on the beach that were selling it, that was a way to let them know that was an American that bought that one, charge them double, and everyone else could pay the regular. But
right.
You know what? I would give this, it tastes like a Corona. Anyone knows me, I can't. What style of beer do they consider these? The Mexican beer, cerveza,
which is lager.
So okay, so is that all right? Then you said it. So cerveza, actually, does that mean lager?
Is it lager or beer? It's one or the other.
I thought it was a lager, to be quite honest with you.
I thought it just meant beer. I don't know. I'm sure.
How hard is it? Is it harder to duplicate a simple beer like this when you're home brewing?
Lagers, yes.
This just in. I just Googled it. Google Translation just said it means beer.
Mm-hmm.
So staying corrected.
There goes my high school Spanish class right out the window.
See. Oh goodness! So I'm drinking these.
It's refreshing.
I'm drinking the Lagunitas Sucks, which I didn't realize is an 8% beer. Lagunitas, I like quite a few. It's actually one of the beers that's in one of my fermenters. Is actually inspired from the Lagunitas IPA. I think it's a really solid IPA. This beer's drinking really good. I expected this is 8%. I expect this to be really heavy. I actually kind of expect it to be dark. It's actually lighter than my homebrew in color as far as color goes. It's a pretty good beer. I don't have any issues with it. I don't know how it rates on Beer Advocate. The nose is a little citrusy, but it's solid beer. I would drink this again.
Is it spiced? Is it? I heard you say it was a holiday. Is it a cinnamon or a citrus? What kind of?
So it says this beer is a cereal medley of barley, rye, wheat, and oats, full in complexishness from the 4 grains and a dry hop for a big aroma and resinous flavor. I don't get a whole lot of hops in the nose, but this is a beer that was made during Christmas season, so it wouldn't surprise me if the hops just faded off because it's probably pretty old now.
All right. So I like the holiday beers. I sometimes will buy a 6-pack or 2 and put away, and every once in a while in the middle of summer, even there's just something about a real late night sitting by a fire and just opening up a seasonal, beer. I like this cinnamon spice. Some obviously overdo it, but I don't mind it.
The pumpkin beers is kind of what brought that to life a little bit. Now, if you offer me a pumpkin beer, I'm almost going to turn it down. I'm so pumpkin beered out.
Everybody has one now.
Yeah, pumpkin or whatever you want to call it. The holiday ales, they're fantastic. I do like those. To homebrew 5 gallons as a home brewer, I'm not sure I would do that. I would maybe do a small batch of it. They're typically higher in alcohol, and their spices, clove, and everything. So they're good, but it's not something I would want to drink a whole bunch of. This beer, I expected that to fit in that category, and it's actually quite not. I mean, this is a beer I would gladly drink 5 gallons of, no problem.
All right. Now, Chris, the beer you had, what was your opinion? I know you gave your opinion because, again, anyone who listens to the show knows Chris can't wait till we start, so he drinks, half before we turn the cameras on.
Can't do it.
What? Give me your opinion now that how much is left?
No. I was just working on what was in the can, which, and again, if anybody knows me, I'm a sucker for good can art. You could have like the worst beer possible, but if your can art looks neat, I will buy at least one tall boy of it, and I will drink it. Like I've been sucked into, I don't know how many, like I would say at least mediocre beers. I wouldn't call them bad beers by any stretch of the imagination, but at least say that they're mediocre beers. But because that there was at least a cool design on the can, I was like, "Ooh, let me get that," and then I'll drink it. So this is no exception.
It's funny. I'm the exact opposite. Give me a beer just says
beer
IPA and put some mystery behind it. You give me a fancy schmancy zombie dust looking label, and I'm like, pass. Because to me, it's just like, they had to come up with a fancy label because the beer.
See, yeah, I'm that dummy that will just look at it and be like, oh, that must be good because look at what they sunk into the art on it. So that
dilly.
Oh yeah, but I would also be the same guy that would buy a can of like that Genesee Ice at the same time because it just says it's just beer on the side.
No, it's because it says 99 cents for a 24-ounce can.
Yeah.
Again, you guys are a little younger than me because I'm guessing both of you in your life have grown up with the term generic or generic food or the store brand foods. When that first started, I was in my 20s, and truly, at Kroger's they had 2, a white can with black lettering. It truly just said beer. And they had a yellow can that just said beer. One was an ale, one was a lager. The prices are relevant because, back then, but it truly, that was the big deal. You could go through the Kroger store, and if it was that yellow or that white, it said tomato soup on the can. The can, the tomato soup, the beer, everything was the same couple of colors. Couldn't have been more generic.
Well, that's kind of the crazy thing is I just recently shopped at Aldi's. Shout out Aldi's, and I'm surprised at how good they're here. I'm surprised how good they're. I mean, I got a handful of items from them, and I thought it was better than the name brand stuff. We got there years ago. The name brand. I'm sorry, but if you didn't eat Doritos, the generic Doritos were pitiful. Just like Pop-Tarts. There's a few name brands. Get the Aldi's Doritos. In my opinion, they're better than Doritos now.
Really?
Not even joking. They're absolutely ridiculous. Or I just got an inconsistent batch. I think there was more cheese than there was chip on the ones that I got. It was fantastic. I highly recommend it.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure now Aldi's is a national. I mean, I know they're a chain. I'm pretty sure they're most of the country. And for people who don't know, they really are a store where the store is nothing but their store brand. They do carry a few name brands. And they do carry very basic selection. When you get to the soup, you get the chicken noodle, tomato. They got 5 soups there, not the Kroger's 47, different. But and they do now have a small. Mine has they just reopened ours into a new location, and they now have a full. I'll call it liquor area. They have the wines, a handful of beer, some German beer, some stuff I can't pronounce. Obviously none of them are name brands, nothing I've ever seen or heard before, but, it's inexpensive craft beers, maybe. I mean, some of them were, hey, like Chris just said, the bottles looked fancy. I don't know if that means anything.
That's all I need, brother.
I was at Aldi's. I would get the wine because it would be super cheap, and we cooked with more wine than we drank probably 5 years ago. That's a little bit different now, but here in the house, you could get a bottle of if you buy cooking wine at the grocery store, it's full of sodium and you can't even drink it. But at Aldi's, you could get a cheap $3-4 bottle of wine. We would use it for cooking, and I don't mind enjoying a glass or two with it. Now that I brew a lot of wine, I don't need to do that anymore. But I like it.
Well, we'll move forward. Just because you said it, did you kill your wine? How much of the wine have you, killed out of the batch you made, or did you drink it that night and haven't gone back?
It's still in a 6-gallon carboy. It needs to be bottled. I think most homebrewers would agree that bottling is probably the shittiest part of homebrewing.
Well, cleaning the bottles. Cleaning bottles is the first. Putting it in the bottle is second.
And then capping the bottles
is third.
And then store them. But, I do have a lot of wine still in a 6-gallon carboy because I'm dragging my feet to get it bottled up. Most of my beer that I make, I pretty much keg all of my beer now. I very rarely bottle. And I don't really have a good way to do that with wine because we don't want wine to carbonate. And I don't have any systems right now. So I have to bottle all my wine currently. So the wine I had last week was a test batch. I just made like 3 bottles. So I've dragged my feet on the 30 bottles that I need to bottle and cork.
All right. Well, people who are listening to the show realizing I come to the show and I bring nothing. So we are going to talk about brewing systems tonight. And I'm the one that kind of brought this up because I haven't brewed in quite a few years and need to eventually get back into it. And the last time I was in your store, you had just gotten in a few of these new electric brewing systems. So I wanted to at least talk about it. One, just I needed to be sold maybe, or, just to get an idea of, what's entailed. But I thought first, maybe I wanted to hear from you two, give me 1 through 5. I don't know. I mean, what type of brewing system? I realize we're saying electric, what we're going to talk about today, but what other systems are there?
So, I mean, there's basically your standard. You have extract and you have all grain brews. That's really, there's mini mashes and there's some kind of steps in between. Those are the 2 major differences in brewing. The systems that we're going to talk about today are mainly all grain based. You can certainly use them for extract batches of beer. Don't get me wrong. I did a class not too long ago using the same system. The homebrew that I brought on the cast tonight was actually brewed with the mash and boil. So they're fantastic systems. I like them because the ones we're talking about today run off just a standard wall. Is it 110? Runs off just a standard wall outlet. You don't need to run any special electric like what you have with your dryer or oven. They are a little bit slower versus propane, but overall, I think, quite honestly, they're pretty awesome.
Okay, so the option when we say electric, really what we're talking about is just the heat source, right? I mean, you can have propane, you can have a stovetop, you can have an electric. Is there any other option?
Oh, I believe the big guys are. I believe the big breweries are technically using steam for the most part as their heat source. That way you're not potentially scalding the wort or grains at the bottom of the brew kettle. But I have a propane system, and I've recently switched to the electric systems mainly because I'm brewing in the store sometimes, and I like to brew in my basement when it was really cold outside. I didn't want to go in the garage and freeze, trying to brew. So the electric systems really took my attention pretty quick.
All right. Chris, what do you use? Do you have more than one option, or is your system propane, electric, or do you use just the stovetop?
When I first started out brewing, I did use an electric system, at least, but that was just for the primary stages of home brewing, and that would be like just for like the mash and lautering portion of home brewing. So for everything else, like when it came to the boil and whatnot, I didn't have the power, at least within my rig when I lived over in Fairborn at my old house. Was that I didn't have the power necessary to actually sustain a boil for at least an hour in order to complete the brewing process. So now all that's been converted over to a propane setup, and but I am really interested in hearing about these electric systems. We used one, Joey and I used one when actually we did the porter that we took to the competition last year, and I am looking forward to like trying to use one of those again. And actually, I would like to see one of those all-in-one systems that I believe HBYOB sells. That pretty much take care of everything for you, where you don't have to. I mean, more or less, from what I've read, it seems like you just put all your ingredients in and just kind of set it and forget it. From the looks of it.
Yeah, I think we're going to go there. I think that's the system I kind of want to go to. When I did my brewing, and Joey knows, I only did the extract. And I think at one point towards the end, I did add a few things to the extract to kind of give it more flavor. All done on the stovetop. All done on, it was my, at that time I was pretty religious. I religiously got up every Sunday morning and made my beer, before the family woke up and before everything, got carried away. And same thing, the stovetop, would get hot enough, and obviously you'd let it, it'd sit there and boil for an hour. So that's what I'm used to. But today we are going to talk about the electrics. And because Chris just brought up, Joey, are the electrics just for the boil only, and I think the one you mentioned could be adapted to do both, where it could be the boil and then you could then put a cooler in it, cool it down, and then even pitch your yeast right on it from there. Is that correct?
So I just want to clarify that the ones I'm going to talk about today are the ones that plug into a standard wall outlet in your house. The ones that take the 220, 240, the dryer, those are more advanced. I'm still going to kind of go to more of I don't even want to use the word beginner, but more basic ones. I've been through them all. There's a bunch of different brands. I chose with the store to go with Mash and Boil and Grainfather as the two systems that I offer in the store. I can get into why that was the decision that I made. The biggest reason, just because I think they are the best two options. There's a big price point between the two of them. I do want to clarify that they are not, when they say they're all-in-one systems, you're still brewing. I mean, they're not there. There's a system out there like the Pico Brew, you're sliding a drawer in there. I mean, with these two systems, you are still brewing. When they say all in one, that's a little bit of a stretch, but you are, at the end of the day, you are mashing in it, you're boiling in it. And actually the mash and boil, you can now ferment in it if you want to.
Okay.
But you still are brewing.
How big are let's just start with the size. And you say you carry two. Are these 2 gallon, 5 gallon, 10 gallon? What kind of size of a vessel are we talking about?
So both units are to make a 5-gallon batch of beer. The capacity is closer to 8 gallons. That's just so you can mash in them. You're going to lose water to boil off, but it's to do a 5-gallon batch of beer. You can do less if you want to. If you say you want to do like a test batch, a 2.5-gallon batch, you can still do it in them, but it does require some extra hardware with the Grainfather system.
And I'd assume the 220s versus the 110s. I know you're dealing 110s. That's just a matter of getting the heating element hotter and obviously being able to get to temperature quicker. But once you're up to temperature, really most brewing, there is a temperature you're trying to get it anyway, right? I mean, it's probably just a matter of speed and time that you'd be gaining by a bigger system.
So with the 220 system, I believe it's 220. With those systems, you're obviously going to heat water faster. You're going to come to a boil faster, and you're going to have a more vigorous of a boil. You could probably push 10, 15 gallons at that point. I would say on your standard wall outlet coming from your house without electric, 5 gallons is or you're going to boil more than that, but that would be pushing the threshold. It does get a good vigorous boil, don't get me wrong, but you're pushing the threshold of any further 110 is just not going to cut the mustard. It might not even lick the jar.
Now, just to educate me and maybe other people listening, because I only ever did extract, I did most of all my process, let's say, within a 2 to 3 gallon, amount. And then once it was done and I, was starting to cool, that's when I added the, water to get it then to the 5 gallons. When you guys do the whole grain, is all 5 gallons, or in this case, maybe it's even more, 6 or 7 gallons, is all the liquid in contact with the grain the whole time? Or can you make it, with a 2 or 3 gallons of water, which I guess I'm saying that because you could use a smaller vessel. And then, once you get what, the consistency you want, then just add water to it. Or is that something you can't do when you're all grain?
Chris, you want to answer the question?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to the big difference between extract and all grain, and this is what I kind of had to learn, at least the quote unquote hard way when I switched over, because I first started off with extract, just extract brewing as well, is that when it comes to extract brewing, what you're technically getting is a bunch like the caramel, like the actual extract that you use whenever you're brewing, is all the sugars that not all the sugars, but the majority of the sugars that you're going to need when it comes to the primary fermentation. But when you go to all grain brewing, what you're doing in the first couple of steps of all grain brewing is actually creating that extract that you're using when you do extract brewing. Because when you take the grains, you crush them up and then use the water in order to steep the grains, what you're doing is extracting those sugars from the grains. And so in that portion of it, in the mash and lautering portion of the all grain process, that's where you're kind of creating that extract that you use whenever you buy those large cans of extract that you wind up purchasing when you go to do the brewing process. So what's slightly different, or I guess what's different than between extract and all grain, is that now after you have when in extract brewing, when you just take your cans of extract, you dump the water on top of it, and then you walk right into the boil part of it. What you have in all grain is that you can actually use different amounts of water in order to extract the sugars from the grain, and then and then that's when you transition into the boil soon after that. And there's a couple different ways that you can do that. You can do it either with a batch sparge or fly sparge, whichever way that your system is set up in order to do. But those are the two common methods that you can use in all grain brewing. But yeah, that you can use different amounts of water in order to extract the sugars necessary in order to proceed on into the boil, where you add your hops and then pitch your yeast and all that stuff afterwards.
So back to, I guess my original question was, though, because I can see where somebody starting out maybe doesn't have the ability to boil 5 gallons of water at the right temperature. So it's obviously easier to boil 2 or 3 gallons. So could they extract the sugars and everything that they need, again, using 2 or 3 gallons of water, and then just when that process is done, and you're done with the boil and all that, could you just add 2 more gallons of water? I mean, is that, I'm sure it's going to affect the taste or the recipe somewhat, but it's still doable.
The shorthand answer is yes, you can do that. The long answer is no, you can't do that, because you're using all of your water
the same amount of time to me
to get all of the best efficiency from your grains. If you want to waste a lot of, I don't even want to use the word money. If you want to waste a lot of grains, you could do that. If you want to get the most out of your grains, you're basically going to need all of your full boil water to extract all the sugars out of those grains so that you can get the correct ABV for your beer. There's different brewing types that, I believe most of the traditional beers are like Pargyle brewing, if I'm saying that correctly, where they would brew a really big beer from the first running of the grains, a mediocre beer, when I'm talking ABV, from the second runnings of the grains, and then what they called table beer, which was truly 3% or less, which was, they didn't know it was sterilizing the wort. It's a long story with that, but each consecutive run you do through the water through the grains, you're getting less and less and less
Right, you're extracting less
grains.
because there's less there.
Correct. It's just like, you could take coffee grinds and put it into an espresso. You could use those same coffee grinds from the espresso and probably brew a decent cup of coffee. I don't know, but I'm assuming there's probably still color and caffeine and things that are left in those coffee grinds and still get coffee.
No way.
I'm just in theory, but I don't know anything about coffee.
I know what you're saying.
My point is the same thing happens. That's
take really the same amount of coffee, and you're truly going to get a dark liquid out, but it's not going to be as potent as the first amount that came through. So,
like Chris had said, there's basic when it comes to all grain brewing, there's typically 2 different styles of all grain brewing. You've got 3 technically. You've got brew in a bag, which is kind of what these systems kind of are doing. Then you've got the 2 more traditional methods that we've been kind of read the books to know. That's batch sparging and fly sparging. Batch sparging is you're taking the first batch of water, you're getting probably the most sugars from it, you're draining all that into your boil pot, you're filling up with another batch of water, that's why it's called batch sparging, then you're letting that sit for a very short period of time, and then you're draining into your kettle again. Fly sparging, so that's batch sparging. Fly sparging is where you put that first batch of water in there, and as it drains into your brew pot, you're continually filling it from the top with new water, hot water, sparge water, and they say you get better efficiency by doing it. I've never really found that to be the case. Me personally, it's probably because I'm lazy and I do it quickly, but that's where it kind of breaks down to.
All right, so then let's go back to where we start here. The electronic or the electric brewers. What ways works best with what you sell? And I know you said 2 systems, and I've already kind of got an idea of price. What are we talking price range? Not exact, but what kind of price range are we talking to get into an electric brewing system? And then what's the advanced one?
So when you talk electric, like what me and Chris brewed on was a induction burner. That was $120, fairly cheap. The 2 systems that I'm talking about today is the mash and boil and the grain father. The mash and boil runs $299. The grain father runs $999. So what you're getting from the mash and boil, both systems they're a brew in the bag style system, hence the name of the show. They're like a brew in the bag system, but you are fly sparging with them. You're not really batch sparging, you're fly sparging with them. So you're getting better efficiency in theory than you would from a brew in the bag system. They're all electric. They instead of a bag, like a brew in the bag system, there's a stainless steel cage that sits inside there that you pull up and it drains from beneath that.
All right. Both of you are getting a little above my brewing head. I'm more interested in, I know efficiency is important to a point, but I'd be more curious about safety and the the main thing, first of all, safety. Is this safer, or I'd assume because it's electric, it can be used in a house or a garage or a basement where obviously if I'm using propane, I can't. But at the same time, is it something that can be knocked over that you have to be concerned with? Does it need to be in a safe or a locked up area? What is the next thing? Part of the safety is brew time. Is it something that has to be left attended for hours, or is it an hour? What do we, if you can answer both those questions?
So as far as safety goes, I would say in comparison to propane, it's a lot safer. I've done multiple batches with electric brewing system. I set delayed timer, meaning it kicks on while I'm asleep or before I'm even at my house or before I'm at the store. Versus propane, I wouldn't walk away from propane while it's blazing away in my garage. I've done it, but I wouldn't recommend it. Same thing if kids are running around. Can you not? At the end of the day, we are boiling wort, so there's roughly 5 to 6 gallons, even more, of boiling wort in whatever vessel you have. So if that was a spillover, that would be bad news. But in comparison, I would say the electric systems are more safe than the propane systems.
I'm sure it varies on the recipe, but how long roughly is a boil going to be in one of these electrics?
So no matter what system you have, the typical boil's 60 to 90 minutes.
Okay.
So no matter what system you have, that's where it's going to be boiling. It's going to sit hot for a long period of time, but it's going to boil. That's probably the one control you have with brewing is it's going to boil for 60 to 90 minutes, no matter what type of brewing you do.
Right. Then my next issue, propane versus this, is always a concern of mine. Is just cleanup. Is there more or less pieces in an electric versus a propane? What's my, once I'm done, which is quicker and easier to get, cleaned and sanitized and ready to go next time? Is it propane or electric?
What do you think, Chris?
I would say I would have to assume that the electric setup would be easier to set up. I mean, from using propane systems for the last 3 or 4 years or so, I mean, you always have to worry about, constantly making sure that whatever you're putting into your kettle is not sticking to the bottom of it by, keeping it moving, which I've scorched the bottom of mine a couple of times, especially when I was doing propane. Oh, not with propane, but I'm saying with what I put into the kettle itself. Yeah, like when I did, I think the second to last extract brew I did, I just dumped the extract in straight up without actually warming it up like you're supposed to.
Sure.
So the cold extract just sat at the bottom and wound up.
Nobody likes a scorched bottom.
No, I'd prefer not to.
I'm pretty sure your pot still knows it that from that brew day.
Oh yeah, I think I still have it if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, overall, cleaning up afterwards, I would have to assume that electric setup would be easier.
Well, that's actually probably a good bullet point between electric and propane systems. And I had a customer come in. He worded it better than I could ever. He said, "I like to brew beer. I don't want to be MacGyver." When you start talking propane systems, you really start talking about the complete DIY side of you build it. You build it to your specifications.
So there's no pre-bought systems. You can't just go buy a propane system.
There's exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, most brewers who use propane have pretty much built their equipment themselves.
2 words: turkey fryer.
Turkey fryer. Another one be repurposed cooler, Coleman coolers or whatever.
Yeah, right.
At that point you're reusing ball valves and things you can go get at Home Depot or those type of places. Versus the electric systems are more kind of like the customer said. I don't want to be MacGyver. I don't want to build my brewery. I just want to brew on the damn thing.
Okay. And you've used the word efficiency a couple times. But when people say that, sometimes I know how people can be, they're saving, money or it's more efficient, but is it adding a quarter, to a 12-ounce beer? Or is it adding $1 to, what I'm saying? If I'm going to brew a beer, I don't know money. Let's say it costs me, $1 to brew this 12 ounces. Is a more or less of, is electric going to cost me a quarter more? Or are we talking, the difference in efficiency is just pennies? Or is it even that different at all?
So I would say I can't really talk too much cost, but what I can talk is having a few beers, starting your brewing, and your propane going poof, and having to go get propane sucks. You never have, other than your DP&L getting shut off, you don't have to worry about that with electric brewing. As far as
I've done that with smoking.
As far as cost goes, I don't know. I honestly don't know the difference.
Nothing like 6 hours into a big pork butt cook and your gas goes out.
I don't use exactly. I use charcoal. You can always top it off, but then again, you can run out of charcoal. And
I've done both, and I'm sorry. Again, nothing better than having a big. I have one big chest size gas smoker. Is my biggest of 4 smokers. So. But when you're doing a big party and you're putting like 6 or 7 butts in there and, you just fill it up, it does suck though when it runs out. So,
but I guess here's a question I do have though, Joey. So if you are using like an electric setup, I would assume that your efficiency would at least improve over propane because you can control the temperature of your, either of your wort or your strike water or whatever well, I'd say not necessarily exactly what you want, but close enough.
Right, good question.
More consistency.
Is the electricity thermostated? I mean, is it thermal controlled? Yeah. I mean, I set a temperature and it stays there?
Both both systems have temperature control with them. There's REM systems with the propane system. There's different systems, if you use pumps and things like that. But for both electric,
we're talking scorched bottoms and REM systems. Starting to see a theme here.
Both systems have temperature control as far as electric goes.
So it might take longer to get to temperature, but you control that temperature maybe better with electric than propane?
I mean, the shorthand answer is yes. When you're comparing your average brewer with propane, there are brewers out there that have built REM systems and different things like that are accomplishing the same thing.
All right. So back to then, the other question was just cleanup. So you think electric, I still can't picture all grain, and maybe it just depends on the system you've rigged up, I guess what you're saying. But it does sound like cleanup should be a little easier in electric because you should just have the one vessel, right?
That's another tough one. If you're comparing a brew and a bag system, which you would still use propane for, then I would say
you've used brew in a bag a couple times. Are you talking these are like, when you say brew in a bag, is this more where you're just buying the kits that come with everything you need, or and I use a bag again, not a bag, but I know you can put all your grains in a cheesecloth or whatever, that type of thing. When you say a beer in a bag, give me describe it for us rookies. What are you specifically saying?
So a brew in a bag is basically a giant ass tea bag. That's what brew in a bag is.
That's what I thought.
A huge, and that's the thing with brew in the bag is to brew a 5-gallon batch of beer, you might need probably a 10 or 12 gallon pot because you need to accommodate all the grains. Everything's going into one pot. You're making a giant tea bag. When you're extract brewers, we use specialty grains. But you're doing your entire grain batch in one giant tea bag. We sell the bags in the store. A lot of brewers do it. And that's where the electric systems like the mash and boil and Grainfather, I say, are similar to that because you're putting the grains in the same vessel you're boiling in. And that's why I put the same comparison between brew in the bag and these electric systems versus the system like I have is basically converted coolers. I think Chris has the same. That's what we're using as our mash tun to hold a consistent temperature for an hour. Because that's why we use the coolers versus these all grain systems. They're double walled insulated, but yet they lose their temperature. So the burner constantly kicks on and off to keep it at its designated temperature.
Now, Chris, have you done the brew in the bag?
I've done it once, and actually I thought it turned out quite well. I think it was just like a simple IPA recipe that they put into the bag. And I think afterwards, like all I did was I think I might have dry hopped it with like some Cascade or something like that to kind of spruce it up just a little bit. But overall, I mean, for the price, you can't really beat it, to be quite honest with you.
Well, now, and Joey knows back in the day when we watched YouTube videos, somebody I saw, he was doing an extract and then still added a small amount of grains in a bag, to his boil to give it an additional flavor than the extract was giving it.
So that's the big difference between all grain and extract brewing is, for the most part, you're going to use grains no matter what. Mark's talking more about where he got started or did was the pre-hopped cans or bags or wherever it came in versus these have a designated amount of, like I said, referred to as specialty grains. So those specialty grains are basically the flavor where you're getting the flavor and the color from the beer. Not too much fermentables from there. When you get into all grain brewing, instead of using liquid or dry malt extract, you're actually using a base grain, which can be two-row, pale ale, Maris Otter. I mean, the list goes on and on. Vienna, Pilsner, to get your alcohol by volume. So you're using that starch conversion to get your alcohol by volume. What we seen, Mark, was a guy using specialty grains to get color and flavor into his beer, but then he used the extract to get the base malt to get the alcohol by volume.
Right. Now, the
majority of it.
Now, the beer in the bag thing, is that something, is it a kit? You can buy it, or if I just come to you and say, here's what I want to do, obviously you'll have the bag and you'll sell me the grains I need to fill that bag?
So whether you're doing when you get into all grain brewing, whether you're doing brew in a bag, the cooler system, a rim system, an electric system, the recipe doesn't change.
Okay. Now, again, because the whole reason I stopped brewing was just the cleanup. Brewing a bag seems easier to me as far as a cleanup issue. Chris, quit laughing at me. So, is that because again, I am really pushing towards the electric brewer, and and again, you make fun if I don't use a grain. So, is that the next step, or is that just a different step?
It's just a different step. When you extract brew, it takes much less time than all grain brewing. I personally liked all grain brewing just because I love to brew. I find all grain brewers are typically more the ones who enjoy the hobby of brewing. Not that extract people don't as well. I don't mean it like that. But they're more into the science of why and how, and they're really into the hobby. They make a day of it. It's just like we talked before, when you're smoking on a grill. Yeah, we can go down to a restaurant, or we can sit out and kill 8 hours, doing it ourselves.
Well, me and Chris talk, it's similar to fantasy football. I don't know that, let's say, 10 million people play fantasy football. There's still only a handful that get into it like me and Chris, where we're technically playing every day of the year. We're into it. I'm obviously into fantasy football more than I could ever get into brewing, but I at least put my foot in and started brewing, and I did it for actually a few years. I brewed a lot more than the average person. I actually did it. I cornied, I kegged, I had draft. And then believe it or not, I did it when my kids were little, and as they got a little bit older, it was actually just more of a pain in the butt. But I want to get back into it. Let's real quick, because we are running a little bit out of time. Just quickly, I realize we tell people they can get into brewing cheap, and they really can, because you can use your stovetop, and you can use, and I'm guessing you can use your stovetop and still do grains in some cases, but really, your stovetop and getting started is going to be the cheapest. But if we're going to get into a system, I know you said 300 and 1,000. Let's say I come in tomorrow and spend the $300. Do I need, other than obviously the grains and all that, but what other equipment is needed to brew with the $300 electric system?
So I guess a better question would be to ask, if you were a customer walking through the door, which one would I recommend for you? The first question I have is, are you already brewing? Meaning, how much do you already have? Are you already an all grain brewer, or do you already have quite a bit of?
Nope.
Quite a bit of. So if you have none, if you have absolutely nothing, I would recommend the Grainfather. For someone like Chris, who already has a wort chiller, a pot, this, and potentially a pump, I would recommend the Mash and Boil.
But I again didn't write down which you're saying brand names. Which is the 300, which is the 1,000.
So the Mash and Boil is a 300, and the Grainfather is the 1,000.
All
and
right,
the reason being is
$700 more dollars for seven. Why do I need to spend $700 more dollars if I've never brewed before?
That's a great question. The Mash and Boil is basically your boil pot and your mash tun. The Grainfather is those two things, along with a much more advanced controller unit, a wort chiller, which is very important when you're all grain brewing, and lastly, a pump, which is getting you. We keep using the word efficiency, getting you better efficiency, extracting more from the grains. So if you're a wintertime brewer, I would say, and you're already a brewer, I would recommend the Mash and Boil. Keep your all grain brewing instead of going to extract. If you're saying, hey, I want to be an all grain brewer, I've never bought, I own nothing, I would say the Grainfather, because if you bought all of those things individually, it's a great value for what you get.
Mrs. Easy complains about my Heineken prices. So when I tell her I'm dropping $1,000 to learn to start brewing tomorrow, that seems a little harder of a sell than a $300. Can someone spend $300 and start brewing. If I'm coming in and buy back to my original question, if I come in and spend the $300, what else do I need?
So if you are brand new to brewing, I recommend our $200 absolutely everything kit and get you started with an extract brewing. I mean, quite honestly, if you have back to when you're a brewer, it's good to have your own designated equipment. For $100, you can get started brewing beer. It's going to require a few things that you potentially already have at your house, but you'll get a good start.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend, when people use the word all grain brewing, they think it's more difficult. It's not more difficult. It's just more expensive in my opinion.
I'm just looking for something easier. I mean, back to, all right. I said no, I had no experience, but I technically do. I have fermentation buckets. I think my biggest pot's a 4-gallon. I do have some materials that I bought, including I got cornies, I got hoses, I got all that. I'm just looking for an easier way. Maybe it's wrong. I'm looking at an easier way to get into brewing with grains without getting into the propane part of it.
And that's the thing. I mean, obviously, if you build your own equipment, that's probably cheaper than getting either one of these systems, in all honesty.
Do you sell that stuff? I mean, can I come to you and buy I guess it's not a system, like you said, to buy all the pieces to just make my own brewing system, let's say.
So we have a kit that will get you started. No matter any of these systems we use, none of that equipment will go to waste. All you would need additionally would be, we sell a complete mash tun for around $100 and a pot big enough to boil your full boil. That's $40. So for under $150, you would get into all grain brewing if you just wanted to, start if cost was a factor for you.
And that would be using propane as your heat source?
Quite honestly, as long as you have a forgiving wife, your stovetop works just fine.
I got a forgiving, because, if she doesn't forget, then...
Well, I've had quite a few beers. Regrettably, I go downstairs and I get cleaning stuff and I get doing other things, and next thing you know, I start hearing the dreaded on the boil over, and then you get booted to the basement or the garage for most of us.
I've been there with extract, doing extract boil. So the one last question is, which I guess this is $1,000 one, and Chris brought it up at the very beginning, is the $1,000 one where I can do it all, meaning I can boil, extract my grain, the sugars, do all that, obviously filter it somehow, then throw in a wort chiller, put my yeast on top, cap it somehow, technically do everything in one container, and the liquid never move, all the way to then where I'm ready to then finally put it into either a bottle or a corny. Will either one do that, or neither one?
So both systems essentially do exactly the same thing. You're still going to need your own fermentation equipment and bottles or keg or anything like that.
So you can't ferment inside of either one of these.
You can in the mash and boil. I can't answer the question on the grain father. However, I don't recommend it because you can't brew anything else if your beer's sitting in your brewing system.
I can buy a lot of these Monterey's. They're only $5.99 a 6-pack.
To transfer it to a fermenter, so your brewing system is open again, is what I recommend, because the fermenter's fairly inexpensive, and quite honestly, when you buy a system like that, you probably already own one anyway.
I do. I got carboids. I got all kinds of that.
As far as personal preference, I own the mash and boil. I've used it many times. It's what brewed one of the beers I'm drinking tonight. I've got no problems with it whatsoever. It's a fantastic system. That's why I offer it in the store. I brewed on the grain father, and quite honestly, the cleanup was part of the reason why I never really wanted to mess with it too much. The cleanup was a breeze. The delayed start setting, I'm going to have a hard time going back to the mash and boil now that I've used the grain father. However, both systems, in my opinion, are, depending on what your needs are, great choices.
Now, when you again, back to cost, obviously using either one of these systems, I don't know. I don't even know how the average brewer estimates cost or if they even worry about it. But when you whole grain, I don't even know whatever your more popular recipes. I think we've talked about that in the past. People are trying to knock off Sierra Nevada or this and that. Roughly, when you do that type of beer, let's say I want to come in and do a Sierra Nevada knockoff. Do you have an idea what my cost per 12 ounces?
I mean, it can really vary. We just started offering 1 pound bags of hops in the store. So anytime you buy in bulk, it's really subjective. If you buy it by the pound, it's going to be one price. If you're buying things in bulk, you're going to save a lot of money. So there's not really a clear cut answer on that.
Okay, but still, compared to extract brewing, what is grains? Is it a flavor or is there a cost difference when you do grains versus extract?
So all grain brewing will save you money over extract brewing,
right? Because you're drawing out your own sugars. You didn't pay someone to do it, correct? That's really
unless you value your time.
Right.
If your time, if it was your job, extract
right.
brewing, it depends on how you want to look at it. All grain brewing is cheaper than extract brewing. However, all grain brewer takes, I wouldn't say double, but more time than extract brewing.
Hey, I got a lot of time to just Netflix and chill. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's another thing. That's the reason why these electric systems are so awesome. I've had a customer who owned the Grainfather for I think he has like the first generation Grainfather before I even had him at the store. And he says, I have a work at home job. It brews while I'm working. It's
sure.
not like you're not and that's the thing I like about the electric systems. It's not like you're taking away from your life per se. You're simply, you're brewing. It is time consuming, but it's not like it's not like you're sitting there with a stir spoon stirring, the entire time. It's kind of doing itself. The Grainfather we sell is Bluetooth enabled. You can actually say heat, do this, do that directly from your cell phone. I brewed in the store the other day. I filled it up with my initial water for my mash. I said, hey, tomorrow I'm going to show up at the store at 11 a.m. I want you to go ahead and kick on at 10 a.m. from my app. I said, start brewing at 10 a.m. I came in the store at 11 a.m. and poured grains into it. It had water at the proper temperature. From my cell phone app, it said start. I had some customers come in while I was brewing. I said, hey, I'm brewing. The phone app kicked on my phone, says, hey, you need to add your hop addition. You need to do this. You need to do that. So, I mean, it's pretty cool to have your phone kind of telling you. I program my phone directly into the Grainfather. With the mash and boil, you're not getting any of that. And how important is that worth the cost difference? I don't know. It really just depends on what it's worth to you.
I'm not a cost guy as much as I'm just trying to give people an idea. I'm just a labor guy. Like I said, I'm just trying to figure out, the labor in it. And like I said, it's not, it's like, smoking, pork butts, the time it's actually cooking is the easy part. It's getting it out ahead of time, getting the flame started, getting it, getting the rub made and all that. That's the pain. Then you clean up after that. Then it's when you're done, you got to pull it. It's, you got to clean the pan, all that, that 12 hours, 15 hours in the middle. That's the easy part.
Well, I mean, that's honestly the thing is, you know what, if you don't enjoy the hobby of brewing, it's tough to stay with brewing. I'll admit it. You really got to love the hobby of it.
Okay, so you're saying do most people stay into it because they enjoy the actual brewing process, or do they enjoy the final product?
I guess it would kind of go with the scenario you used. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy smoking, meat on the grill. The time it invested for me, I don't mind setting my alarm at 4 a.m. to put a brisket on my grill. Doesn't bug me because I enjoy it. It's fun for me, and I'm not a morning person. So to brew, it's the same thing. I enjoy brewing. So for me to invest in the equipment and invest my time is worth it to me because I feel I brew something better. Although, Chris, that beer's got me really, really, really nervous on how much you do enjoy that. For the most part, I brew better beer than I get at the store.
All right. We're going to end it here. Electronic brewing is just it's just another way, So, the last thing, Chris, what do you have anything brewing right at the moment?
Actually, yeah, I have a couple of things actually in the works. One is a Hefeweizen that I actually have sitting in some carboys at the moment. So the recipe, and I can share it with you guys real quick, actually. So let's see. So here's the recipe that I used, like all of the stuff that purchased at HBYOB. So to kind of walk you guys through at least what I was aiming for in terms of what I wanted to get out of the beer itself. But afterwards, the beer, I actually hit all my targets, surprisingly enough. My efficiency, typically I get somewhere in like the 65% range, 65-70% in terms of efficiency. I brewed actually, it was about a month ago, like the last time it snowed, like on a Saturday morning, unfortunately. But I still went ahead and did anyway. But I wound up at about 60, somewhere between 55 and 60% efficiency. But still wound up with around 6.3% ABV. And I've got it sitting in 2 carboys right now. One I'm just going to dump directly into my keg once that kicks. And then the other I'm dry hopping with another half ounce or so of Hallertau just to kind of give it a little bit more aroma to it. And then I have a recipe for a double IPA that I finished up last week that I need to actually get back down to the store in order to brew here within the next couple of weeks and have it ready for summertime.
Give me your final opinion on the beer you've been drinking this evening. The Nugs or Nugget or Nougat. What the hell? I don't know what the hell it was now.
My goodness, like this is excellent.
Okay.
In terms of like if I had to guess, because that's what I like doing. Whenever I like eat something that I really enjoy, whenever I drink something or at least to drink a beer that I really enjoy, I always like want to try and break it down into, to find a way that I could make something similar to it if I had the chance. It doesn't seem like in terms of grains this is overly complex, but it just seems like, because it is, and they say it right on the can that it is double dry hopped. You can smell the fruity aroma because they do use mosaic, and that's typically, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of alpha acids, it's between like, I want to say like 11-12%, somewhere in that range in terms of alpha acids, but also in terms of the aromas that you get those like earthy, like floral, like fruity.
So this is a beer you would try to duplicate?
I would actually, because it doesn't, for 8%, it doesn't seem like it's overly complicated in grains, and then just seems like they put in a ton of mosaic into it, but it does not taste like an 8% ABV beer.
All right.
So I'm fairly impressed. And again, the can art, they got me with the can art. So
all right. Throw us again your Twitter account where people can get a hold of you.
You can come find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX.
And you'll have recipes, something for them. If someone has a question, you can help them out.
All of my stuff, actually, if you follow me on Twitter, whenever I do brew, I post pretty much my entire process, like my setup, my recipe, how things are going throughout the day. You'll probably see pictures of my kids like running around, like as I am brewing. So all of that stuff you can find on my Twitter profile. And then sometimes if things are actually going extremely well, I might, hop over to the HBYOB, handle and post stuff from there too, and see how professional we can get.
All right. And Joey, what do you have right now that you have in a fermenter or brewing?
So I have 2 in a fermenters. One is a juicy pale ale, and the other one is the IPA, like I said, inspired by Lagunitas. If you want to visit us, I have a website here. Just going to show you. You can visit the website here. If you just click on Brewcast, you can get links to watch the show in the future. That would be fantastic. And that's all I got going on.
And again, stop in the store. if you have questions there, feel free to ask Joey. But, if you say, if you're a listener, let him know. And, if you even say, hey, there's a topic I'd like to hear your guys' opinion, let us know. And, even, the goal might be eventually here, we try to get someone on the air even, or read, a question or two. We'll work it out for him.
I would like to thank Corey for subscribing to the YouTube channel. I appreciate it very much, Corey. Thank you.
All right. And did you give your Twitter account where someone, if they want to shoot you? I know you're not the Mr. Social Media, but we're getting you there.
I believe it's HBYOB
937. I should have just done it. It's HBYOB 937. You can shoot Joey a question or direct message or anything there. We'll get him caught up here. So I'm Easy Kill. I'm at A Fantasy Fan. Like I said, I do a fantasy podcast with Chris once a week, which we did earlier tonight. Me and Chris have been talking for a while. We appreciate Joey. Real quick, do you have a piece of equipment, anything specific? Maybe we'll be talking about next week. Maybe give people an idea of what we'll be talking about.
So next week, I'd like to talk about fermenters and all the different options with fermenters.
All right. Really looking forward to that one. Nothing like a good fermenter. So, I'm going to start brewing. I promise. One of these days, I'm going to stop buying the Aldi's beer and I will start brewing. I'm going there.
You smoke some pork butts and we'll brew beer together. How about that?
Hey, I did, man, this last weekend, I grilled all 3 days. I did chicken. I did pork butt on Friday. I did steaks on Saturday. I did a big batch of chicken breasts on Sunday. It was perfect. 40 degrees is good grilling temperature. So
that's not bad. Yeah.
My neighbor I haven't seen like 3 months, and it's not one of those kind of neighbors. He walked out and he's like, man, it is nice out here. And he goes, and just nice to see someone grilling, even though I grill all through the winter anyway. So
right.
God loves I love those eggs. Nothing like an egg so you can grill in the winter. So
exactly. Oh yeah.
We'll have to have a grilling. We'll do a grilling podcast one of these days.
Oh yeah, I'm talk smoking meat all day.
All right, I appreciate you all coming out tonight and joining us live. It'll be posted on the HBYOB.com website if you want to watch it later. We will see you next Tuesday. And again, keep brewing and don't drink and drive. Thanks for coming out.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Woo!